First story. My autistic son is hyperactive, so I banned him from using computers, pulled him out of coding, declined his acceptance letters into electronics, and demanded he choose a different path. He sulked, so I grounded him, and my ungrateful son called the help crisis line, and then left my house and hired a silly lawyer, telling me not to contact him. Now everyone has abandoned me, and I'm regretting my actions. I 57F am a mother of 3, my daughter is 23, and I have 2 sons, 17 and 11. This post concerns my 17-year-old, who's currently a high school junior. I'm at a point where I'm genuinely confused whether modern parenting expectations are out of touch, or if I'm really just being overbearing, like my son says. I'll start by saying I'm not anti-technology. I use a smartphone like everyone else. I work from home in admin for a healthcare company, and I'm familiar with the basics. But I've also paid close attention to what this constant digital stimulation is doing to young people. The rates of anxiety, depression, and mood disorders in kids and teens have absolutely exploded over the past 15 years. You don't have to take my word for it. Look up data from the CDC, WHO, or the American Psychological Association. Even people who invented these devices have openly said they don't let their own kids have unlimited access. Steve Jobs didn't let his kids use iPads. Bill Gates enforced screen limits. The Obamas banned TV and video games on school nights. These are highly educated, well-connected people. It makes you wonder what they know that we don't. That's why, as a mother who truly cares about her children's mental health and development, I've always had electronics rules in our home. My youngest is 11 and won't be getting a phone until he's 14, the same rule I had for my older kids. The 17-year-old is required to hand in his laptop and phone by 8 p.m. every night so that he's off screens at least an hour before his 9 p.m. bedtime. These rules weren't made in a vacuum. They're based on real pediatric guidelines, not some arbitrary control thing. Now, my son has always had a very strong interest in computers. He's been teaching himself things online since he was maybe 12. I'll admit he's smart. He even figured out how to code a simple website when he was in middle school. The problem is that he lives for screens. He can spend hours and hours in front of his laptop if we don't stop him. And the difference in his behavior when he's on electronics versus when he's off is stark. On family camping trips, where there's no internet or screens, he's a completely different kid, calm, cooperative, and focused. But after a weekend spent online, he gets short-tempered, irritable, and just generally unpleasant. He's also on the autism spectrum, Asperger's specifically, and from what I've read, people with Asperger's can be especially sensitive to sensory input like screen time. I've brought this up with his pediatrician before, and while they didn't directly tell me to restrict computers, they did say that routine, structure, and minimizing overstimulation were all important for someone like him. We've had issues over the years where he tried to sneak his phone back after hours. Once, when he was 15, I found out he had ordered a second phone using his allowance and was hiding it in a shoebox. Another time, he took apart one of the parental control timers we installed on the router and tried to bypass it. That led to a huge argument, and when we grounded him for a week, he told my husband and me that we were destroying his life. It's not that we're trying to suppress his interests, but we also have to be realistic about what's good for him. My husband and I talked it through extensively, and we both agreed that a career in computer science might not be the best fit for him. It requires constant screen exposure, erratic work hours, and intense sensory focus, all things we've seen trigger negative behavior in him. So even though he's interested in it, we've gently redirected him to think about other paths, maybe something more hands-on or social, like teaching or occupational therapy. That decision got put to the test last summer when we made what we now believe was a mistake. We signed him up for a summer coding camp, a day program that ran from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. with almost constant computer time. We thought, let's give him a chance, maybe we're wrong. But within 3 days, the results were awful. He came home moody and snappy. He refused to come to dinner. He was yelling at his younger brother over nothing. When I asked him what was going on, he shouted at me that we would never understand and slammed his door. The final straw came when he got into a full-blown screaming match with my husband over not wanting to attend the 4th day. At that point, we pulled him from the camp. And yes, I'll admit it was disappointing to see it fail, not because I wanted to be right, but because I hoped maybe he could handle it. But it only reinforced our concerns. After he calmed down, we tried explaining that this wasn't a punishment. We were just doing what was best for his well-being. He wasn't grounded or anything. We even took him out to dinner that weekend to talk and smooth things over. Unfortunately, he took that whole situation as proof that we were against him. Since then, things have gotten worse. He's become more sneaky with his electronics. We found a remote access app installed on his school laptop that allowed him to bypass certain lockout functions. When confronted, he said he needed more time to learn. I reminded him that he already had scheduled time each day for homework and studying. This was clearly going beyond that. I should also mention, he did buy his own Raspberry Pi kit and some other parts from money he saved up. But it doesn't matter, those devices are using my home's power, my Wi-Fi, and my space. I don't care who paid for the device, our house, our rules. Eventually, we had to install Microsoft Family Safety to set hard limits on his screen time. That way, even if he tries to sneak it back, the system locks him out after 8 p.m. This was after several chances and multiple discussions. And honestly, since putting that in place, things have been a bit more manageable. That is, until yesterday. I walked past his room around 8:30 p.m. and heard him talking in a very upset tone. I paused not to eavesdrop, but because it sounded serious. I heard him say something like, "I can't do this anymore. They're watching everything I do. I'm always being punished," followed by what I swear were quiet sobs. When he came out of his room later, I asked him calmly who he had been talking to. He went stiff and said it was no one. I pressed gently, and he finally said it was the local crisis line. I asked why, and he just said he needed someone to talk to who wasn't going to tell him he's wrong. I told him he can talk to us, but he snapped that he can't unless we take off the restrictions. That line stuck with me all night. It wasn't the first time he tried using emotional pressure to get around the rules, but the crisis line part was new. And honestly, I don't appreciate being manipulated, especially when the rules exist for his well-being, not as punishment. After he said that, he tried to walk past me like the conversation was over. I stopped him and told him plainly, calling a crisis line over basic house rules is excessive, and it won't be tolerated in this home. He rolled his eyes, muttered something about me being delusional, and shut himself in his room. That attitude, that's exactly what happens after long hours at the computer. It's predictable at this point. The more time he spends staring at screens, the more defiant and sarcastic he becomes. When he's off electronics for a weekend, he's polite, he participates in family meals, and he helps his little brother with homework. But as soon as he gets that laptop back, it's like his whole personality shifts. There's more context here too, stuff from the last few years that made us tighten the rules. When he was 15, he had a phase where he refused to shower because he didn't want to lose time away from his laptop. He'd argue that hygiene breaks disrupted his workflow. That lasted almost 3 months. We had to enforce a no laptop until you shower rule. It worked, but it showed us how obsessive he gets. Around that same time, he stayed up until 3 a.m. for several nights trying to finish a project. We found out because his grades tanked and he was falling asleep in class. The school reached out, saying he seemed burnt out. When we confronted him, he argued that it was fine because he was learning. That's when the 8 p.m. rule first started. Then last year, he skipped lunch for a week straight because he wanted to work on something in the library. His counselor emailed us, worried about his eating habits. Again, tied directly to computer use. So no, I'm not pulling these rules out of thin air. Every limit we've ever put in place came after a specific incident. Every boundary came from watching how electronics affect his mood, sleep, hygiene, and stress level. I keep logs of events because otherwise he claims I'm overreacting. But I have time-stamped examples of every meltdown, every night he tried to stay up, and every lie about homework so he could get more screen time. After he locked himself in his room last night, I talked to my husband. We're united on this, we're not budging. We're not letting a teenager dictate what's healthy for him. We're the adults. And before anyone asks, yes, he has access to therapy. He's been in and out of counseling since he was 12. This morning, he came downstairs, barely speaking to me. He grabbed his backpack and left early. I asked if he wanted a ride. He said no. He's not grounded. He still has all his privileges. He's just angry he can't be on a laptop past 8 p.m. That's the whole issue here. But what really pushed me to post this is what happened later today. His older sister called me from her apartment. She said he texted her last night, telling her that he might run away when he turns 18, and that my husband and I are ruining his future. She wanted to hear my side before she responded to him. I explained exactly what I'm explaining here. The crisis call, the attempt at using emotional leverage, the years of incidents, the professional guidelines, and the actual behavior shifts we've seen with our own eyes. Her response frustrated me. She said, "Mom, I get the rules, but he's almost an adult. Maybe lighten up a little." She has never lived with someone on the spectrum full time. She has no idea how quickly things can spiral if we remove all guidelines. And she doesn't see how hostile he becomes when he's overstimulated. Then she said something that irritated me even more. You might lose him if you keep pushing. No. I'm not accepting that narrative. Parenting isn't a personality contest. It's not about making your kid like you. It's about doing what's right, even when they hate it. If I let him sit in his room on electronics until 2 a.m. every night, ignore his hygiene, skip meals, and melt down constantly, that would be neglect. Support is not abuse. I told her that. She ended the call politely, but clearly disagreed. And I know she's going to tell him she feels bad for him, which isn't helpful. Then, a few hours later, my husband texted me saying the school counselor called him. Apparently my son went to the office during lunch and said he was overwhelmed at home. When asked what that meant, he said, "Too many rules. That's it." The counselor asked if something changed at home. My husband explained the same things I'm explaining here. The rules didn't change. He's just testing boundaries. The counselor said they'd check in with him again later, but they didn't seem alarmed. They know him. They've seen this pattern. And I'll be honest, I'm tired of being painted as the bad guy because I don't allow screen addiction. This is the only area of his life where he pushes like this. He follows chores, curfews, and house rules. But tell him to get off a computer. Suddenly, I'm the worst mother on earth. The part that pushed me to actually write this post is that he came home today, went straight to his room, and taped a piece of paper to his door that said, "You'd rather boss me around than be my mom." I knocked and told him the sign was unnecessary. He didn't respond. I left it alone. So here I am dealing with a son who thinks normal parental limits are oppression, a daughter who thinks I'm too strict, and a society that seems to think the only good parent is the one who lets their kid do whatever they want as long as they're not crying. I'm not bending this rule. I'm not apologizing for protecting my kid from something that consistently destabilizes him. And I'm not going to remove safeguards because he calls a crisis line or makes dramatic signs for his bedroom door. But I genuinely want outside opinions because right now I'm being told I'm controlling, overbearing, outdated, and closed-minded simply for enforcing limits backed by medical guidelines, past incidents, and observable behavior patterns. So I guess this is where I ask. Ada? Comments. Comment 1. I'm 18. I just moved out of my parents' place. My dad was like you. Obsessed with routine, always quoting articles and experts, always convinced the problem was my behavior, never the rules. Reading this felt like déjà vu. He also had this God complex where he thought he knew what career was best for me. Guess what? I don't talk to him anymore. Haven't in months. You're on the exact same path. You think you're raising a healthy, balanced adult, but you're actually raising someone who will bolt the second he's legally able and not come back. You don't get to micromanage your kid to the finish line of 18 and expect a relationship after. You say he's calmer without screens. Maybe he's just calmer when you're not constantly breathing down his neck. You're proud of having logs of his meltdowns, but didn't once stop to ask why a kid with autism is breaking down that often under your care. Newsflash. If someone calls a crisis line, it's not because of screen addiction. It's because they don't feel safe or heard where they are. YTA all the way. Comment 2. Mental health professional here, licensed clinical social worker with 12 years in adolescent therapy. YTA. The amount of psychological control you're exerting over your son is alarming. You framed this entire post as if you're saving him from himself, but what you're actually doing is eroding his autonomy during the most crucial developmental window of his life. He is 17. You are imposing restrictions more appropriate for a preteen. You proudly mention structure and routine, but what you've built is a closed system with zero room for flexibility or negotiation, a key developmental need for neurodivergent teens. Autonomy is not optional for them. It's essential for survival. The worst part is your reaction to the crisis line call. You dismissed it as emotional leverage. That tells me everything. You're more concerned with being right than understanding the scale of distress that led him to reach out for help from strangers. That call wasn't manipulation. That was a lifeline. You talk about the Obamas and tech CEOs like you're following some elite parenting blueprint. You're not. You're running an emotional dictatorship disguised as concern. If he cuts you off at 18, it won't be because of screens. It'll be because he learned he was safer trusting strangers on a phone line than his own mother. Wake up before it's too late. Comment 3. Okay, so I'm autistic. Diagnosed late, in my 20s. Your post hit me harder than I expected. Because your son sounds like a younger version of me. And I want to be real with you. You're not seeing what he's actually fighting for. You think this is about screens. It's not. It's about his identity. You're not just setting screen limits. You're telling him the one thing that makes him feel like he belongs in the world is unhealthy, dangerous, and off limits. That breaks people like us. You say he's irritable and defiant. What you call defiance might just be autistic burnout. Screens are predictable. Socializing, meals, chores, those are draining. You notice he's better on camping trips, probably because the external pressure disappears, not because screens are the devil. And I know you think pulling him from that camp was helping him. But holy SHT, I can't imagine how devastating that must have felt for him. Like being led into a room where people finally speak your language, and then getting dragged out because you acted wrong. Your son isn't choosing electronics over family. He's trying to survive in a family that won't accept his brain as it is. You don't have to give him free rein. But if you keep treating his passion like it's poison, don't be shocked when he cuts contact the second he turns 18. Update. It's been a few weeks since I posted, and a lot has happened. I appreciate the responses, even the ones that accused me of abuse, because at least they made me think more critically about how others perceive what I consider basic parenting. But I need to clarify a few things, give some important updates, and ask for more insight, because the situation has now spiraled beyond what I expected. Let's start with the crisis line phone call. It turns out he was never speaking to a crisis counselor. He was talking to his older sister, the 23-year-old. She admitted this herself when she came over a few days after I posted. She said she didn't mean to mislead me, but didn't want to escalate things further in the moment. So now I know. My son used an emotional manipulation tactic, with his sister's help, to bypass a rule he knew he broke. That alone validated my approach. If a 17-year-old has to lie to keep a phone past 8 p.m., he's clearly not ready for adult responsibility. His sister claimed she was just trying to keep him grounded and talk him down because he was venting about how stifling the rules were. I told her bluntly, if she wants to play therapist, she can do it in her own home, not by undermining my rules. She didn't take that well. She accused me of refusing to adapt and said that I'm going to lose him for good. I told her to stop dramatizing. You don't cry mental health crisis just to dodge accountability. A few days later, the real blow-up happened. I discovered that my son had been secretly applying to computer science programs behind my back. He used school computers and time after school in the library. I found out when an envelope arrived from a local university addressed to him, not us, and he tried to hide it. I opened it. He was accepted into a competitive pre-college CS summer program. I confronted him. He got defensive immediately. You don't support anything I care about. I'm going no matter what. I told him clearly, if he wanted to go to college, he could. But he would not be pursuing computer science as long as he lived in this house under our care. I reminded him what happened at the coding camp. I reminded him how screen exposure impacts him emotionally and physically. He said none of that mattered and accused me of holding him hostage. My husband, who has always backed me up, wavered for the first time. He didn't openly contradict me, but after my son stormed off, he said, maybe we should just let him go. It's a summer program, not a job offer. I told him that was a mistake. We already saw what happened when he was immersed in tech. We're not going to let him derail his stability just because society says, follow your passion. But I tried to meet him halfway. We offered a compromise. He could use his laptop for an extra 30 minutes on weekends if he took on more chores and agreed to no sneaking devices during the week. We said he could read or research programming from books offline, and even gave him a printed textbook on logic gates and basic systems architecture. He acted like it was a joke, told us he wasn't a middle-aged Luddite, and shoved the book back at me. His exact words, no one learns from books anymore. This is just more of your boomer control fantasy. The next day, I caught him online at 1:12 am. He'd somehow gotten around the family safety settings and was busy building some kind of coding bot. I shut off the Wi-Fi, went into his room, and told him to hand over the laptop. He refused. I told him that if he didn't give it up right then, the phone was going next. Then he threatened again to call the crisis line. This time I didn't care. I said, go ahead and call, but the phone stays on the kitchen counter. He screamed that I was abusing him and that he had rights. I told him he has the right to follow rules in a home he doesn't pay for. He threw his phone against the wall, didn't break it, but hard enough to scare his younger brother who was down the hall. So I did what I said. No phone. He didn't speak to us for 2 days. Then one night, While we were out grocery shopping, he left. He packed a backpack and went to stay with a friend from school, a classmate I'd never met. Apparently someone who understands his situation. His friend's parents texted me to say he was safe and that they weren't getting involved in family politics. They said he could stay a few days while we cool off. I told them this wasn't some misunderstanding, this was a clear boundary violation, and they were enabling it. They stopped responding. Now it's been 4 days. He hasn't come home. We haven't cut him off, his room is still here. But we're not going to beg. I contacted the school to make sure he's still attending. He is. I did schedule a meeting with the family therapist we saw last year. She remembered us and remembered the behavior issues. But after listening, she said something that honestly infuriated me. You might be doing the right things for the wrong reasons. She said we were technically consistent, but that we were creating a zero flexibility home with no space for collaborative trust building. I asked her if she thought screen addiction was a joke. She said no, but emotional estrangement can be just as damaging as tech overuse. I told her we weren't paying for therapy to get criticized. She asked if I wanted her to continue working with us. I said no. If the professionals won't back framework, I don't want their help. So now here we are. The son is staying with another family. Husband is unsure about our stance. Daughter is openly taking our son's side. The therapist is out. And our younger son is watching all of this unfold. All because I asked my kid to get off a screen by 8 p.m. If this is what it takes to be considered a good parent, I don't want it. I still believe we've done the right thing. I still believe his interest in computers needs supervision. But the house feels quieter. And I know that's not a good thing. I'll update again if he returns home. Comments. Comment 1. What you don't get is that your son isn't addicted. He's immersed. This is probably the first thing in his life that makes sense to him, especially if he's neurodivergent. You say he gets irritable after coding. That's not because of the code. That's because he knows he'll be punished for doing something he loves. You're not setting limits, you're tying a leash around his entire identity and calling it parenting. And banning him from the phone after lying about a crisis line. Jesus, you don't trust him. You don't respect him. You've made it clear that the only version of him you'll accept is the one that follows your blueprint. Don't be surprised when he walks out for good and never looks back. He's already halfway there. Comment 2. Reading your update honestly made me sad. I think you love your kid. I think you're scared. I think you saw behavior that worried you and thought clamping down was the answer. And I get that impulse. I really do. But this is not parenting anymore. This is control for its own sake. You caught your son using his time to apply to college. That's not rebellion. That's independence. That's him fighting for a future you told him he's not allowed to want. You think you're protecting him, but all you're doing is slamming every door he tries to open. You say you offered a compromise, but even your compromise was insulting. A textbook instead of the tools he actually learns with. That's like telling an artist they can't use paint. But here's a book about color theory. It's tone deaf. And now he's gone. And you still think you're winning. Your younger son is watching this. Don't underestimate the message he's getting loud and clear. If you challenge the rules, you'll lose your place in the family. I hope you turn this around before you lose both of them. Update. It's been a little over 2 weeks since my last update, and the situation has deteriorated. First, the school incident. After several days with no contact from my 17-year-old, I decided to stop by during lunch to talk to him. Not to argue, to have a face-to-face conversation without yelling, lying, or third-party interference. I checked in at the office properly. I wasn't storming the building. I stood outside the cafeteria where students sit in the courtyard. As soon as he saw me, he stopped eating, stood up, grabbed his backpack, and walked away. Didn't say a word. Wouldn't even look at me. A few of his friends saw the whole thing and stared at me like I was some kind of intruder. A teacher on duty came over and asked if I needed help, which only added to the humiliation. I left immediately. I'm not going to chase a teenager across a courtyard while an audience watches. After that, I decided I needed to speak to the friend's parents, the ones housing him. I texted them asking for a meeting. They agreed reluctantly. When I arrived, the entire energy was hostile. They didn't offer me a seat. They didn't ask how I was doing. The first thing the mother said was, "We're not sending him back until he feels safe going home." As if I'm hitting him. I explained our rules, explained the history, and explained the incidents with hygiene, missed meals, all of it. Their response: "He's calmer here because he's not being monitored like a prisoner." They told me he's been doing his homework, sleeping normally, and spending time with their son playing board games. The father actually said, maybe the issue isn't the screens, maybe the issue is the environment. I told them they were enabling him, and if they wanted to supervise his behavior like a pet project, go ahead. We ended the conversation when my son's friend came downstairs, saw me, and immediately said, he's not going with you, so stop trying. The parents didn't correct him. They didn't even look embarrassed. I left before I said something I'd regret. And all of that would have been enough drama on its own. But then things escalated at home with our 11-year-old. He's always been an easy, mild kid. Follows rules. He does his homework without us tracking him. Suddenly, he's withdrawing, snapping at me, ignoring directions. The counselor at school emailed us saying he's been unusually quiet in class and turned in 2 assignments late, which he has never done before. 2 nights ago, I asked him why he slammed his door. He said, because I don't want to get yelled at for breathing wrong. I have never yelled at him about breathing wrong. That's not something that has ever happened. The only thing I can think is that he's absorbing the panic and rebellion from his brother. He also asked me, are you going to take my phone away too when I'm older? He doesn't even have a phone. But he said it with fear, like he believes he's next in line for exile. I tried to reassure him, but the tension in the house is clearly affecting him. Then came the breaking point. My husband left. He didn't leave me in a dramatic sense. He didn't pack up his whole life. But last weekend he said, I'm going to stay with our son for a few days, so he knows he has support from both parents. He said it like it was reasonable. Like choosing to leave with a runaway teen was neutrality. He packed a suitcase. Not a small bag. A full suitcase. Left with barely a discussion. He said I was making the house unlivable with constant conflict. I said conflict wouldn't exist if people stopped encouraging rebellion. He didn't argue, which almost made it worse. He just said, you're not listening to anyone, and drove away. He's now staying at our daughter's apartment along with our 17-year-old. So now it's all 3 of them. My husband, my daughter, and my son united against me. And that leads to the next part. My daughter sent me an email drafted like a formal letter. She said that unless I stop contacting or attempting to contact my son directly or through school, she will seek a harassment order on his behalf once he turns 18. She said a lawyer she knows through work told her they could send a notice to document the pattern. All because I tried to talk to my teenager. I didn't reply. I'm not legitimizing an empty threat written by a 23-year-old trying to play attorney because she once watched a legal drama. Since my husband left, the house feels wrong. Not peaceful, just hollow. The 11-year-old stays in his room more. Dinner is quiet. I sleep lightly because every sound makes me wonder if someone else is leaving. I find myself looking at the 17-year-old's empty room, even though I told myself I wouldn't. I won't apologize for parenting, but I'm not made of stone either. I didn't want a fractured family. I wanted discipline, structure, and guidance. But somehow that turned into alliances. Forming like this is a custody battle when no one even filed anything. The last blow came yesterday. My husband texted me saying he and our daughter think the best plan is for our son to stay with them for as long as needed, including after 18, and that they need space from my intensity. I still believe I did the right thing. I still believe screens and unregulated tech immersion have harmed my son more than he realizes. But I'm now facing a united front that has twisted the narrative into invasion of privacy and control instead of what it actually was, parenting. I haven't decided what to do next. I won't beg them to come home. I won't chase a teenager across town. And I won't dismantle structure just because the modern world worships convenience over discipline. But I also won't pretend this doesn't hurt. Comments. Comment 1. Your son, your husband, and your daughter have all walked away because they don't see you as someone who can collaborate. You only know how to issue rules and punishments. That's it. I've been through divorce. I know exactly how it feels when your partner sides with the kid. I once thought my ex was soft for not backing me up. Now, I realize I was just too damn rigid. You think consistency is strength. Sometimes, it's just a wall that keeps everyone else out until they stop trying to come back in. Your 11-year-old is already showing cracks. That's what should scare you most. Not lawyer threats. Not email ultimatums. Not your husband leaving. It's your youngest mirroring the same fear and shutdown your oldest is running from. You keep saying you won't chase a teenager. But you should. Not with control. With curiosity. With humility. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting alone in that big, structured house, wondering why everyone you raised wants nothing to do with you. Comment 2. You interpret every single relationship in your life as a threat to your authority. Your husband didn't defect. He tapped out because he sees the wreckage. Your daughter isn't a fake lawyer. She's being forced into a parental protection role because she saw her brother cracking under the weight of your rigidity. The other parents didn't undermine you. They provided the basic emotional safety your son couldn't find at home. You keep using phrases like structure and discipline, but what you actually built was a pressure chamber. No flexibility, no compromise, no shared decision-making. And now the whole system is collapsing because the people inside it are suffocating. You've turned your own kid into a flight risk, your partner into an outsider, and your youngest into a future therapy client. The saddest part? You still think you're the victim here. Update. It's been several years since everything fell apart. And if anyone is still reading, here's where things stand now. I'm writing this because I need an outlet. Not because I expect sympathy. After the situation with my 17-year-old blew up, my husband never moved back home. He stayed with our daughter long term. I kept expecting him to come to his senses and return so we could handle things together. Instead, he filed for divorce 6 months later. His reasoning was irreconcilable parenting differences. That's the sanitized version. In private filings, he wrote that I created an emotionally controlling environment and refused to participate in collaborative decision-making. I fought tooth and nail. I hired a lawyer I couldn't afford and spent months preparing documentation logs, behavior records, therapist notes, anything that showed I wasn't the irrational monster he and the kids painted me to be. I begged him not to divide the family like this. I asked him to fight alongside me to reclaim authority instead of abandoning it. He said he had fought long enough just living in that house. The judge ended up granting him joint custody of our younger son, but designated me the primary custodial parent because I had been the stay-at-home caregiver for most of his early life. At the time, I thought that was a small victory. Now it feels like a cruel joke. My youngest is legally supposed to spend alternating weekends and one weekday evening with me. In reality, he barely shows up. And when he does, he sits silently on his phone or does homework at the kitchen table like he's in a waiting room. He answers questions with one-word responses. No eye contact. No conversation. He doesn't eat meals with me unless I tell him he has to. And even then he finishes in minutes and retreats to the guest room he now uses. He's polite, painfully polite in the way a child is polite with a stranger they don't trust. Every visit feels like an obligation he can't wait to fulfill, so he can go home to his father. The boy who used to beg me to read to him now treats me like a distant relative he barely remembers. As for my older children, I haven't spoken to them in years. Not because I didn't try. I've called, emailed, and texted. I've sent holiday cards, birthday messages, and even handwritten letters. For the first year, I kept expecting one of them to respond, even if only to yell at me or argue. Silence at least has emotion behind it. But I got nothing. Eventually, my messages started bouncing because my daughter blocked my number and email. My son did the same. I once sent a letter to my son's workplace after I found out through a distant cousin, not through him, that he got a job in the tech field. They returned it unopened with a brief note requesting that I refrain from further contact. I don't know if that came from him or HR. Either way, I got the message. And yes, he went into computer science anyway. The field I desperately tried to protect him from. The career I believed would overstimulate him and destabilize everything. From what I've heard, he's doing well. After the divorce, we sold the house. My husband and the realtor handled most of it because I couldn't bear walking through rooms that still felt like my children lived there. I moved into a one-bedroom condo. The silence here is different from the silence in the old house. This one is heavier. It stays with you even when you sleep. I told myself for years that society created this problem, that modern parenting expects adults to surrender authority to teenagers, that screens destroyed my son's ability to regulate, that my husband caved under pressure, and that I was simply doing what was best. I blamed everything except myself because the alternative felt like a betrayal of the principles I built my life around. But recently, I joined an online support group for estranged parents. At first, I vented about disrespectful children, modern entitlement, and the collapse of discipline. But as I read through other stories, I saw patterns I didn't want to recognize. Parents who insisted they were structured when they were actually inflexible. Parents who dismissed cries for help as manipulation. Parents who interpreted independence as rebellion. Parents who loved rules more than relationships. Several posts mirrored my own life. so closely it made me nauseous. A moderator messaged me privately and told me something blunt. Estrangement doesn't happen because of one conflict. It happens because people feel unheard for a very long time. That line hasn't left me. I'm not pretending I've had some dramatic revelation. I'm not suddenly claiming I was wrong about screens, or discipline, or parenting. I still believe I was trying to do the responsible thing. I still believe children need structure. I still believe I didn't deserve to lose my family for enforcing reasonable limits. But I've started to accept that intent doesn't erase impact. And the impact of my choices, whether justified or not, is that I live alone in a quiet condo, with 2 grown children who treat me like a ghost, and a younger one who keeps as much distance as the custody agreement allows. Last month, I had surgery to remove a benign mass from my abdomen. Nothing life-threatening. But they kept me overnight for monitoring. The nurse asked if anyone was coming to pick me up in the morning. I told her my husband and children were busy with work. In reality, I hadn't told any of them. I didn't want to face another rejection. A rideshare driver took me home. That's where things stand now. I don't know if anything will ever change. I don't expect a reconciliation. I don't expect a phone call. I don't expect them to show up on my doorstep. I'm not delusional. This is the consequence. Comments. Comment 1. I haven't spoken to my mother in 5 years. And this update reads exactly like something she would write, nothing but self-pity and zero accountability. My mom also thought she was being structured, thought she was protecting me from the world. What she was really doing was treating me like a project she was managing instead of a person she was supposed to be raising. You say you don't expect a phone call. Good. Because it's not coming. You put rules over people for years. You had your chance to hear them, see them, and connect. You didn't. And now they've moved on. You might think your loneliness is the price for doing the right thing. It's not. It's the result of refusing to evolve. You didn't just lose them. You pushed them out the door and locked it behind them, then acted shocked when they didn't come back. If you want to make peace before you die, start by admitting this isn't just the consequence of parenting. It's the result of prioritizing obedience over love. Comment 2. This update genuinely made me sad. Not in a poor you way, but in a you really never got it kind of way. It's clear you're not evil. You weren't trying to hurt anyone. You believed what you were doing was right, and you stuck with it. But the fact that even now, after losing everything, you still use phrases like reasonable limits and intent doesn't erase impact without actually owning the emotional fallout. That tells me the door is still closed. Just cleaner now. And what's worse is you still think you're alone because the world changed too much. No, you're alone because you didn't. That surgery story broke me a little. Because I've seen people like you sit in hospital rooms wondering where everyone went. And it's never sudden. It's years of tiny cuts, small choices, and unbending days that build a wall so high no one can scale it anymore. I don't hate you. But I hope you're finally starting to understand why they left. And why they might never come back. Second story. My bi girlfriend kissed a girl in front of me as a dare, then tried to hug me. I pushed her away, packed my bags, and left. Now all her friends are telling me to move on, acting like children, and claiming I'm overreacting. I'm going to keep it straight because I don't even know how I should feel. Basically, me, my GF, and our friend group were hanging out at one of our friends' houses. We were playing Uno, just having fun, cursing each other, hitting each other, stuff that happens in an Uno match. But out of nowhere, one of my friends asks my girlfriend, "How much money would it cost for you to kiss a girl?" And I should specify that she is bisexual. It's something she was clear about with me from the start, and I didn't really mind whatsoever. After my friend asked her that, she just said, "Free, brah," in a very clear joking tone, which we all laughed a bit about. But then immediately she just said, "You know what?" And she went and kissed the other girl in our friend group. The group was in shock, but I feel like they were happy shocked. They had their mouths open in shock, but they were smiling, and some of them started laughing. While I was sitting there just staring at her, I genuinely felt like my heart completely disappeared. I wasn't mad nor sad. I just felt super blank. She then went to me to hug me, and I just pushed her away lightly, which she reacted to with surprise. Without saying a single word, I stood up from the floor and started packing my stuff, while my girlfriend was asking me why I was so mad, and that it was just a joke. While my friends were still effing laughing about it, I again continued to just stare at her, trying to make her realize what she just did. When I was done, I left the house and walked home, which was a little bit far, but I honestly didn't feel like I cared at that moment. When I got home, my phone was full of missed calls, and about 30 texts from her, asking me what had happened and all of that stuff. I wrote a text to her, telling her that we were done, and that I just couldn't believe that she would genuinely kiss someone else in front of me and expect me to just take it like it was nothing. I told her goodbye and blocked her. Then about 2 hours later, my friends started texting me, calling me overdramatic. They were all telling me I was acting like a little kid, and that I shouldn't have gotten so mad because it's just two girls kissing. Yes, before you all ask, I blocked all of them everywhere. I don't even know how I should feel. Keep in mind, I'm writing this 2 days after this happened, and I'm still processing it. Am I actually in the wrong? I don't even think that I am whatsoever, but I'm still effing weirded out about it. Ada. Comments. Comment 1. Why did it bother you so much? OP. She kissed someone else in front of me. That's not something that just gets passed as a joke, man. Comment 2. I'm still trying to figure out the casual. We were all hitting each other like you do in normal Uno games. OP. What I meant by this is the chaos that usually happens in long Uno matches in friend groups. At least that is something that happened a lot in that group. We played a version of Uno called No Mercy, and we played with a lot of made-up rules to make things more chaotic. Deleted comment, but it goes like this. Were you both willing to give up all pussy for the entire relationship? OP. I am not a religious person, nor do I follow any of that alpha male stuff you said, nor am I American. A deleted comment asked if OP would react differently if his ex was not bi. OP. I don't really believe that I would have reacted differently if she was straight, as I stated in the edit of the post. Conversations about that type of stuff and boundaries were made and established. Comment 3. The irony of this story, starting with, I'm gonna keep it straight, when his GF, in fact, did lesbian Uno. OP. I've seen 10 replies about this thing so far. I swear it wasn't intentional LMAO. Update. Edit. Hello, y'all. I've read a lot of the opinions on this, and I decided to text her again to explain the reason that I left based on some of your suggestions. As of writing this, I'm only left on scene. But no matter if they answer or not, I don't believe I want to go back together. Something that I believe should be common sense for some people is that yes, during this 3 years we have both talked about everything that has to do with boundaries, stuff that we like in those terms, things that we would both not be okay with doing. Even if we were together for 3 years, I don't believe doing such a thing as a joke is a good excuse to stay with somebody who broke your trust and played it as some dare. And I think it's even a worse look if you decide to break your partner's trust just like that. I appreciate the opinions and the suggestions a lot. If something else that I require advice on happens, I'm going to update this same post. But for now, I'm grateful. Edit 2. Hello, this is the last edit I'm going to do on this post since I feel like I've sorted out everything, and I wanted to clear some things for those curious. 1. Today, she responded to the paragraph I sent with nothing but a laughing face. No apology, no text, nothing. So I don't believe there's anything else to do on that one. I don't care anymore and have no interest in anything that has to do with her anymore. 2. The person who asked her the question of how much it would cost was a guy and not the other girl. I am not sure what the other girl thought about it, but I don't really care either since she, like the others, only laughed about it. And neither do I care about the guy either. I don't have any interest in knowing about any of them at all. 3. The only person I've stayed friends with from that group was someone who wasn't in the hangout spot when everything happened. He had reached out to me through Discord and asked me to explain everything. I did, and he understood me. I'm not sure if he's friends with the others anymore, as all he's told me is that he doesn't feel comfortable talking with them after I explained everything. So far with him, everything's cool. 4. This isn't much of a clearance, but an opinion from myself. I've read a lot of the comments, and I've learned a lot of stuff. Some things I've agreed with and some not at all, but something that I don't understand, and I apologize if it offends anybody, is a genuine lack of reading comprehension from some people. Almost all of the comments that told me I was the always told me that I should have run with it and had a threesome. You're a PSSY. I find it really hot when my wife kisses another girl. Grow TF up. It's just girls kissing. And she's better off without someone controlling. Most of them are always only saying that. In my past edit, I specifically said how this type of stuff is boundaries that we had both established over the course of time. It was something that both of us agreed that we wouldn't do, as we both found it disrespectful to do that in a relationship. If you find it hot, and you've established with your partner that you don't mind when they do stuff like that with someone else, then that's you. I strongly believe that the people who commented that stuff just jumped by reading the title and nothing else. And the fact that some of you would genuinely try to enforce your mindset onto someone that is clearly against it is honestly very sad in my opinion. I won't update this post anymore, as I believe I've understood everything. I really appreciate everyone who helped me understand things and gave me their POV, while also giving me tips on things I should do. I do believe I will start focusing on myself more with stuff like the gym and try to be more social so I can find good friends. I hope nothing but the best for those who helped me. NBTW. No, the pun from the first line wasn't intentional, Elmao. Thank you. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.